Thank you, Deputy. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for returning. Were you all able to abide by my instructions during the recess? Very good. Then we'll get started. Mr. Escobar?
Your Honor, the defense would call Bruce Koenig.
All right.
May it please the court. Counsel.
I'm going to let him get seated, and then I'll reposition as well. And Mr. Martin, you can too.
Thank you.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you shall give in this call to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, Mr. Escobar, I'm going to relocate. Mr. Martin, if you wish to too.
Is it okay if I do, when they start playing the video, I think there's gonna be a long
Okay, well,
CD.
I have to reposition.
Yeah,
I can't
so-
see the jury, but you can when you're ready.
Yes, ma'am, when the video starts playing,
Okay.
I'll do it. Thank you, Your Honor.
Mhm. Go ahead, Mr. Escobar.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Koenig.
Good afternoon.
Would you please state your full name for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
Yes, my name is Bruce E. Koenig, Koenig.
And would you tell us a little bit about your formal education, Mr. Koenig?
Yes, sir. I have a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Maryland. I majored in both physics and mathematics. I've completed an electronics course through what at the time was called DeVry Technology, but now is DeVry University. My master's degree is in forensic science from George Washington University. I've taken additional graduate level courses at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, University of Utah, George Mason University, and the University of Colorado, Denver.
Tell us a little bit about your coursework with your undergraduate work.
Like I said, it was pretty science directed with math and, and physics. So basically, all the general physics theory courses. I got well beyond, I think, 3 courses beyond integral calculus in my math degree. Physics is physics. It doesn't really change.
Tell us a little bit about your master's degree in the forensic sciences and what did that entail?
Yes, that was a course that was science plus law, because that's what forensic science is. So it had a number of courses involving various aspects that are conducted in forensic field, including my own, and then courses, legal courses from the law department and things like evidence, criminal law. Most attorneys don't study much in the way of criminal law, they mostly in the civil area. Ours, since I was an FBI agent, was criminal, and then we took some basic constitutional law courses.
You took some courses in some additional institutions. What were some of those courses that you took, for example, MIT and what have you?
MIT was a 2-week course. I was one of the 2 people in this large class that actually didn't have a PhD, so I was kind of in the minority. It was 2 weeks of looking at what's called sound spectrograms, which is a way to represent sounds, and looking at, could you look at those, and so if somebody said something, could you interpret what they said from the spectrogram? So it was a fairly unique course, but for me, it's a background in that signal analysis part of doing that kind of work.
And some of the other courses that you took at the other universities?
Yes, George Mason University was a course in acoustics involving room environments and other types of things. University of Utah was a course in authenticity of audio recordings.
What does that mean, authenticity of audio recordings?
Authenticity in our field involves determining if a particular recording was unaltered, continuous, that is, wasn't stopped or started, is consistent with the recording system it was made on, and it's the original or an identical copy of it, what we call a clone. So if you have a Word copy or an MP3 file at home and you make a copy of it, you're probably making a clone. If you don't make any changes, that's what we call it. University of Colorado, Denver, I've taken a number of courses in various forensic, what we call media, audio, video, they overlap. If you start looking at the administrative data and files, they're often very similar. If it's a JPEG image when you take a picture with your camera, or a video file or an audio file, often the metadata part of it can be very, very similar. So the courses might say they're audio or video or imaging.
Exactly. I guess we need to approach next week.
I'm going to stay here for a few minutes when the video starts. I can see all the jurors, I just can't see.
Your Honor, I can tell you when we're going to be using the screen. It's going to be some distance from that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Escobar.
In addition to your formal education, Mr. Koenig, have you also taken some courses dealing and specializing in forensics, specifically in the area of video and audio analysis?
Yes, sir.
And tell us a little bit about that, those courses that you took. I'm going to name a couple of them.
Okay.
First one being the applications of modern imaging processing systems. I think that was done by the International Society for Optical Engineering, and that was in, I guess, it was in Bellingham. Is that correct?
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about that particular course and what was the focus of that course.
Yes, the focus, they're more of an academic type people, taught the class, PhD types, and they talk through all the the aspects of digital imaging, where you break the image into a set of squares or rectangles, pixels, okay? They went through all the theoretical basis for it, how the sensors actually do that. They actually play tricks to get what we end up with at the end. They're good tricks, but there's certain ways they use the so-called algorithms in the cameras and all to do that. So it was a very intensive, I think 3 or 4 days, really good, gave you a thorough understanding of really what's happening in the digital imaging world to get from a picture you're taking of to something that looks like a file that you can play back and see it.
You also had some training. I know you mentioned earlier to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury that you were an FBI agent at one time, and you took, looks like a course with the FBI, laboratory quality assurance training on evidence submission, examination, and return. Remember that?
Yes, sir. I was an FBI agent for 25 years. 21 of that was as a supervisor in the what we call the engineering section. So it was involved, my work was mostly forensic. We were also involved with things like developing miniature tape recorders for the field, handling complicated operational things in the field, where we had to conceal a mic in a room that would be difficult to do that. But most of my work was forensic. Evidence in any forensic field and how it's handled is critical. That's my training for the FBI. You want to make sure you handle it with following the standards, making sure nothing has changed, that somebody can come back and look at what you did and understand what you did and be able to verify that. So the FBI, when I was there, I listed the one course, but they had more than one, that everybody had to take, whether you were brand new learning the field or you'd been there for a decade. They always wanted to make sure the evidence, and you always understood it was very important in how it was handled.
You took a course titled Forensic Authentication of Digital Audio presented by the National Center for Media Forensics.
Okay, that was one of the courses I took at Denver. So that one would talked about those particular fields. But again, there's some overlap to other fields. In other words, when you learn about audio and video, you're also learning about image, and vice versa. So they, in the analog days, for which I come from originally, an audio cassette, a video recording, and film, remember, days of film, were completely different technologies. So in other words, you can know a lot about audio analog and know almost nothing about video or film. Nowadays, they overlap. All three now, the FBI lab, all the other labs pretty well do like we do privately, handle all three, because they just overlap.
You took another course there in Denver, Colorado called Forensic Authentication of Digital Images. And that was presented by the National Center for Media Forensics. Is that correct?
That's correct. That course talked about how you authenticate images. We often use the administrative data within the file to tell us if it's original or not. So if you have a JPEG image and you put it into Photoshop, for instance, and process it and save it, I will immediately tell you it was in Photoshop. I may not be able to tell you exactly what happened, but Adobe, which makes Photoshop, puts their name all over the metadata. It's everywhere. So you know, and the original camera would not have done that. So that's your first step. The second thing is, if you want to know what happened, there's what's called algorithms. They're just a set of digital instructions that look at the file and say, okay, if you're familiar with processing, let's say you have a person in a picture, but now you're not dating that person anymore and you don't want them in the picture. So you could take the background, for instance, and that's in there, and copy it over where the person is. So now the person would disappear and look like the background. Well, there's algorithms that say, oh, is there more than one place that a set of pixels are? So it'll look at all the pixels and see, is there a set of pixels here And now there's another set over here that's identical. It'll look at complicated things that when you recompress something, and like JPEG compresses the data, means it changes it every time, actually degrades it, in fairness. When it does that, that compression can often be tracked with these algorithms. So we go through that set. So it was a course walking through all of these complicated type of algorithms and how they work. It's one thing to use something, but somebody like me has to get up and be able to explain what it did. Just saying, oh yeah, I put it in Photoshop or something, that's not really good enough. You need to know what is happening. What did it do?
You took a course in, it looks like, San Jose, California, Mastering Analog Video Technology. Is that correct?
Was that with Sony?
I believe it was, yes, it was Sony.
Yeah.
Tell us about Sony and their input on this, this forensic world of ours.
Yep. Sony, surprising to most people, dominate the professional video world. If you're as old as I am, you remember VHS and Beta. VHS made it as a consumer format. What most people don't know is the professionals stayed with Beta. So all these years you've seen cameras, and now they're digital Beta. That's what's used. So Sony is the foremost experts. They make most of even the equipment in the field. So taking the courses gives you that information about how their systems work in great detail. They have the actual engineers that were involved with developing the equipment. So it's very interesting to us, kind of technical, geeky people.
And you took multiple of their courses throughout your career, is that correct?
Yes, I only list parts of them here. Yes.
You also took a course, I believe it was in Maryland, called Signal and Image Processing and Analysis for Scientists and Engineers. Is that correct?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, these are programs that allow you to do lots of different things scientifically and from an engineering perspective. So you can, it's semi-written for you, so it's not like you have to do all the coding. So you can actually move things around and say, okay, I want a video signal coming in, I want to capture that. Okay, then I want to do this with it, then I want to do this, and then I want to make a graph of this way. And these programs can be set up to do that. And that stuff, our field, we do a lot, because each case is different from each other. So therefore, having a flexible type of program to do that. It's like Photoshop. Photoshop is very flexible. If you try to learn it from the beginning, it's time consuming, but it does great things.
You also took a course in Huntsville, Alabama called Video Analyst System Training. Tell me about that one if you can.
Yes, that is one of the first kind of basic enhancement video courses I ever took. And they went through all the ways to, not only process it to make it better, but to make it in a way that can be presented in court. So it's a whole system. We were there for a couple of weeks that went through all of this, how to filter it, how to capture it properly. If you can't capture it properly, what are your options? It goes through all of those different things you need to know if you're working with real-world surveillance video, for instance, because everyone we get is from a different company almost. Well, it's definitely a different business. Some of the ones overlap. They'll use the same, what we call codecs. That's actually the operating instructions for how the information's put there. So you'll see that even in different companies' machines, but it's always from a different place.
We're going to go through one last one. It was a course you took in Indianapolis, Indiana, it looks like, Video Capture Enhancement and Analysis.
Well, I think that's it's back to the same kind of thing. The videos we get are normally of a proprietary nature. And what that means is, if I handed you the file, including this case, and you try to play it on your computer, it wouldn't play. You wouldn't have what's called the right codec. In other words, if you just get a digital file and you don't know what it is, sometimes even we can't figure out what it is, but we have tricks. We can go in and say, look through it and see if there's somewhere in here a video stream is what we call it. It's what the data is called, a stream. Does this stream look like something you've seen before? You know, we'll have a list of all the ones we have. It'll search those for you, and nice in the digital world, it does it for you. You know, you don't have to try each one. It'll go through. If it does, we can then pull, for instance, a stream out of that file, put it into a regular file, and we now have a perfect copy. It's not been compressed, exactly off of it. And that way we can get good copies, like in this case, that can be played in court.
Before we get too far afield on your expertise, let's talk a little bit about your professional background, and I believe that started somewhere around the year 1970. Is that correct?
Correct. In 1970, I was hired as a special agent of the FBI, and I served in the Atlanta and Detroit divisions. Worked bank robberies, terrorism. I was involved with arresting a number of people from the Ku Klux Klan in Michigan that had blown up a bunch of school buses, for instance. So we worked on those kind of cases or whatever came in those two offices.
And you worked there as a special agent between the years 1970 and 1974. What happens in 1974?
And unfortunately, they promoted me, and I got sent to Washington, D.C., into the engineering section, where I remained for 21 years, working, like I said, mostly forensic work, but some operational work also. The last 8 or 9 years, I was in charge of that group. Great group. We had about 30 people, 4 PhDs that did our research work, a couple of engineers that were also involved with that, because a lot of stuff had to be developed to be able to do our work, and nobody else was doing it, so we had to pay for it. Number of examiners, most of them were like me, physics, electrical engineering, computer science majors mostly, and then a staff to, package evidence to send it out. I mean, some basic clerical type work. But like I said, it was a great group of people, and we were doing work at that time for state and local police departments and for police departments internationally.
Please tell us a little bit and describe some of your professional work while you were working as a special agent in the engineering section of the FBI.
Yeah, like I said, we worked on a wide range of stuff. In the audio world, we were involved with voice ID, enhancement, authenticity, signal analysis. Signal analysis to us is signals that are not voice. Gunshots would be the most common. We also, for instance, looked at signals in planes that crash from the so-called black box. The black box is actually orange. We would do all that in the video field, same kind of thing. Enhancement. We wanted to be able to determine if things were altered or not. So we did all those. So we worked for not only doing the work for the FBI, the National Transportation Safety Board used this on airplane crashes. The state and local used this on murder cases, local crime type cases. We did all of the Drug Enforcement Administration work completely. They're the second largest federal law enforcement after the FBI, and mostly do obviously drug work, and for numbers of other agencies in the government as needed. So we were the people that, were, I guess, fortunate or unfortunate, everybody came to get the work done. And we were given a nice budget so we could get the equipment we needed and the training people needed. And we had to move from, I was there from analog day. I remember when the first year I was there, everything was mostly open reel to reel. And we got our first high-end cassette decks made by a company called Nakamichi, which might still be around. They're a good company. And then we actually, like the little micro cassettes, well, nobody had a good playback. They had these little cheapy things. We had to have design and have a company engineer those out. So we had high quality micro cassettes because we were getting them in all the time. They had to be played back really well. And then we did research work. Some of my papers I have listed came from out of that research. It was very enjoyable for somebody like me being there. A lot of hard work, long hours, great work.
At that period of time, was that lab one of the largest labs
It was by far the largest lab in the world.
in the world?
Yeah, I mean, some of the other agencies like ATF might have one person, maybe. Some agencies had none. They used us. You rarely saw, the biggest local one I saw was New York City Police Department, which we helped set up. Nice group of people up there. And they had like 2 or 3 people in their communication group that was involved with audio. I don't think they did any video.
And you got work from virtually all 50 states?
Oh, yeah, I personally have worked in all 50 states. In fact, every state I would have worked on numerous cases in that state.
And internationally as well?
Yes, I've testified in the last few years in Singapore, Seoul, South Korea, and Belfast, Northern Ireland.
We're going to get to your testimony a little bit later, but
Okay.
I wanted to focus right now on this particular segment. In your career, how many cases have you worked on in analyzing either audio or video recordings? How many would you tell this jury you have worked on?
It would be over 6,000
6,000 cases.
cases, yes.
Cases. Can you describe to the court and to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury some of the most complicated and well-known cases that you have worked on?
Some cases I obviously can't talk about because they've not been made public. You know, we do cases and we can't really talk about them, but I testify today, I could talk about this case, for instance. Yeah, I did all of the Linda Tripp, Monica Lewinsky recordings, determine if they were altered. They've never released the actual numbers, how many there are. Ken Starr ran that group.
And Ken Starr was the prosecutor in the Monica Lewinsky.
He was a special prosecutor, yes. He has always said,
Yes.
to Linda Tripp. Tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury some of the notable cases that you were asked to work on in order to forensically assist the government with those cases.
Right. They released that there's less than 100 recordings she made, okay? About a third of them were found to be not original recordings. And that was part of the investigation on whether that happened. So I was the head of the group that did all of that authenticity work. I got to meet Ms. Tripp. She is definitely a different kind of person, but she was very cooperative in the investigation.
You also were called to work on the attempted assassination of President Reagan.
I was.
You were also called on to work on the Nixon recordings in Watergate.
That's correct. That came up as believe it or not, a civil matter. The Nixon and his family and their Nixon library wanted all of the original recordings destroyed and took it to court. So I can talk about it because it was open court. I came in to put how long would it take to do some of the things that needed to be copy all of them. There's a lot of recordings. The archives is who has it. How long would it take to professionally copy all of them? And then what would be the value of some of that stuff? So I was brought in to testify regarding that. And the court ruled that all could be destroyed, but they all were copied. So the archives have copies. Nobody has the originals anymore. They've all been destroyed.
What other cases were you called on of notoriety to lend your expertise in?
I worked on believe it or not, the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Contrary to what everybody hears, there are no recordings of gunshots of that event. The assassination was caught on a Zapruder film, which had no audio. So I know everybody thinks they're saying there's a second shooter up on the glassy knoll and all. There is no recordings from Dealey Plaza on that day of the assassination. I just finished up a case involving a guy named Robert Durst. He was a billionaire. He went on an HBO special. I always have to look that up. It's called The Jinx, The Life and Crimes of Robert Durst. And what happened was he had lots of video interviews he agreed to, and one of them was a transmitter he had on him. He went into the bathroom and said something like, "Kill them all, of course." And it was a high publicity case for a while. He was tried and convicted of the murder 3 months ago or something like that in LA, and he has since died. So my associate and I did all of the enhancement of the audio and videos. Videos didn't require much enhancement, audio somewhat. And then we authenticated all of them. Ultimately, I did not testify at trial. The defense in the case stipulated, that is, they agreed to my findings, and I did not testify.
In that case, you testified for the government.
Yes, we did all the work for the government.
Okay.
That's correct. See if some of these people would, one goes back, I went to the University of Maryland, and we had an All-American, Len Bias, died of an overdose. I was able to enhance the recording enough so you could hear his last words, which clearly he said, I don't remember exactly, but basically it was the first time he had ever tried drugs, and he died from it. He was All-American at the time.
You also did some work on the John Gotti organized crime.
Yeah, I worked on a number of organized crime cases. The last one that put him in prison where he died, I was testifying for the government, and I was authenticating the recording where he had said that somebody needed to have their knees broken and killed. That's what's on the recording. So I was able to authenticate it and enhance it. And it was high security in the place. Even though I was an armed agent, we had marshals there, everything, because of the case. When I got done, he walked over and shook my hand and thanked me for testifying. It's kind of something I always remember. Even though what I was talking about put him in prison for the rest of his life, he was kind of a gentleman out of that.
Any others that you can point out to?
I've worked on a number of airplane crashes. I probably started with Air Florida back in, that was what, 1980 or so. And to this day, we still do a lot of major airplane crashes. Fortunately, the last few years, there haven't been many, so that's good data. But we do the signal analysis part and enhancement of the black boxes. We've worked on the former Ukrainian President Leon Kuchma, authenticating his recordings that somebody made in his office that were hidden. So we enhanced them and authenticated them.
What about the New England Patriots player, Aaron Hernandez?
Yes, there was a bunch of videos that had to be processed, and the government asked us to do the work.
And again, you were working for the government in that case.
Yes. And we were able to piece together, there were people that thought at some point somebody had a gun in their hand, and that ended up being, once we filtered it, was not true. Another place they weren't sure, and we were able to verify actually had a gun in his hand. So there were a couple things we came out on that. I've testified 3 times in the International Tribunal in The Hague, Netherlands, involving usually stuff out of the former Yugoslavia and all the war crimes that were committed there. We handled the civil case, not wasn't a criminal case, in which a family in Turkey, which owned most of the utilities and banks there, decided to get into politics. And the government told them, nope, you can be in utilities and banks or in politics. Can't be in both. Family said, tough luck, we're going to do it. The country of Turkey took away all their utilities and banks. So they sued them for $17 billion in front of the World Bank. And we were able to go through, and a lot of the recordings the Turkish government gave in the case, as part of what they called discovery, ended up being heavily altered. So all that came out in a World Bank hearing in Washington, D.C., where they had a 3-judge tribunal handling it.
So let's. I know you've got you've got a long list, but we'll spare the jury at this point in time with any more. Tell us about your published work, specifically in the field of forensic audio and video analysis.
Yeah, I have about 50 articles I'm an author or co-author on. To give you an idea, the last one we did, and it's not an exciting title, I'm afraid, but it's the effects of content trimming iPhone 12 in Pro Max video files on iOS 14, which is the operating system. We basically, in an iPhone, if you own an iPhone, you can trim off the beginning, the end, or the middle of a recording. So we want to know, our clients want to know, if that happened. They've got an iPhone recording, did it happen? This goes through and looks at, as I referred to, the administrative information of file, and it's called metadata, M-E-T-A-D-A-T-A. It's the part of the file that's not what you're interested in. If it's a video file, it's the non-video part, okay? That changes when you do these things. For instance, how many, what we call bits, computer files are all made of zeros and ones, they're called bits, okay? That changes the rate they're on the file when you trim it. And there's other changes in the metadata that can tell us sometimes, depends on how you trim it, when the file was originally made and when was it trimmed. It can sometimes even tell you what the original file length was. So if the original file length was 13 minutes and it's now 10, then you know 3 minutes were taken off someplace. So this is a research project we're doing. The new one we're working on is involving audio. There's already been some of those by us and others of the same kind of thing. But every time the operating systems change, we're now up to 15.3.1, they change. So we have to continually look at these things and research. I also have a book chapter. My associate and I are, it was peer reviewed. All of our papers are heavily peer reviewed.
Let's talk about that before we get to the book too much, because I want to focus on that if we can. What does it mean to be peer reviewed in your publications?
Okay. When we do research, and our kind of work, nobody pays us for it. We do it because we need to do it in our field, but nobody pays us for it. We do the research, write it in their format, whatever scientific journal we're going to send it to. And we, in our case, you don't have to, we send it to people in the field that we trust to do a good job of looking at things. So we want them to really look at it. We then send it to the journal. The journal uses their own reviewers, normally at least 2, sometimes 3, that know our field. Okay? We are not told who those people are. Some of the journals don't even let the people reviewing it to know who the authors are. It just varies by journal. They make any remarks they want. They can just accept it straight out. They could say, gee, we like this rewritten, or we don't understand this part, rewrite it, or I'm not sure this is right. Can you show us some of the data? And we certainly do that. So once that gets through and they agree to it, and we agree to it, it then goes through an editor and it's published. Once it's published, the paper takes on its own life beyond the authors. In other words, if my associate, Doug Lacey, L-A-C-E-Y, and I both died tomorrow, our papers are still there. They don't go away. So the people in that journal, or anybody reading it, they don't even have to be from that journal or from that society, if they have a problem with it, they come in and respond to it. So it's meant to be, in some ways, a continuing review process. If somebody a year after we publish it realizes we did something incorrectly according to them, they come forward with that information. So the review process is, I think, quite robust. And all of us want good articles out there. You don't want an article that has a problem in it, or you usually end up with very few typos because of all the reviewers, which is nice. I'm not the greatest typist, and we go from that.
And these published papers that are peer-reviewed, were they both in audio and video forensics?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, and so they weren't limited just to audio.
That's right. Like I said, my latest article is video.
And your research that you conducted in an effort to become proficient enough to write those articles, and accurate enough to write those articles, were also in the area of video forensic analysis.
Yes. Our book chapter, for instance, which was peer-reviewed. Not all books are peer-reviewed. I think we all realize that. But a lot of technical books, like the ones we're in, they do peer-review it. It's involving authenticity of both audio and video. That's what it's about. It's about, I don't know, I want to guess 35 pages or something like that.
Is it the only book on authenticity?
It's the only overview article on the subject that I know of. Other people write a couple chapters in a book giving an overview of it, but they don't go into detail. There's a lot of people that write articles on authenticity, but they're more very specific. Like I was talking about an iPhone recording. They'll be more specific.
It's my understanding that you've also provided throughout your career instructions or lectures on forensic audio and video analysis, both to law enforcement as well as to the private community. Is that correct?
That's right. It's kind of a continuing thing that groups, we've had appellate federal judges that have, what is it, end of the court, I think it's called.
Ends of court.
I'm not a lawyer, obviously.
Yes, ends of court.
And they've invited me to come and talk to them about some aspect of science that I'm involved with and talk to them. And it's real informal. Everybody brings something to eat. When they invite you, you don't have to bring any food, I found out. But it's, yeah. So we'll go in and talk to these people. We want people to be educated in our field, understand what we're doing. I think it's important as more and more audio and video is appearing because of cell phones. Used to be, how many people walked around with a recorder before you had a cell phone? Virtually nobody. Now, everybody almost has something that records quite well in audio and video. So so we're getting more and more cases.
And so your teachings and your lectures were also to law enforcement agencies throughout the country?
Yes, if we're asked, we normally, if possible, try to attend and present.
Let's go back a little bit because I want to go back to your position within the lab. And tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how your position within the lab grew as your career grew.
Right. Like I said, I was brought back from a supervisor out of Detroit. And though I'm officially a supervisor the day I show up, I don't immediately been given 10 people to supervise. Most of our supervision was of projects and cases. I usually had several technicians. One might be in the process of becoming an examiner, and that can take up to 3 or 4 years, depending on what you're doing. Some are just technicians. They don't really have an interest in coming out and testifying to people like yourself. They wish not to, or their education is not at the level that they would meet the standards for that. And I worked up and started doing the complicated cases. The authenticity and signal analysis are the most complicated cases, and I like doing them. So some people just wanted to do more enhancement work and other things. Plenty of work there. Everybody kept busy. And then once I got trained, I started training other people. And in fact, when I retired, the FBI brought me back for 8 more years to continue working on high publicity cases that they were getting and to continue training of some of the people that were there and finish that. So I was in the lab for 21 years, but another 8 working back as a contractor with them.
Of those 21 years that you were in the lab, it's my understanding that during a very last significant portion of your time there, you were running the entire lab.
The last 8 or 9 years I was. The group was so, at that point I really wasn't a supervisor, I was a manager. I had supervisors under me. But there was such a great group of people, we just didn't have problems. People didn't have personnel problems or anything. So I still spent about 60% of my time doing casework. Another 20 was, probably half of it was making up budgets every year and things like that. And sometimes I had to go up with, for instance, the assistant director was going up to Congress, even though I wasn't the one testifying, I was up there. If Congress had some interest in my areas, I was involved with.
Tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury if you're a member of professional societies within your field of expertise.
I am.
And would you tell the jury what societies you are a member of?
Okay. I'm a member of the Acoustical Society of America. It's a very academic group of people, major researchers doing any kind of acoustics like on hearing aids or whale sounds underwater. They do all of those. It's every month there's a huge number of articles published. And I've published there a couple articles, I think, over the years. So they are a lot of the theoretical basis for some of the things I do involving acoustical environments. Okay? So that's what they do. I'm a member of the Audio Engineering Society. I recently, I think it was in 2015, got an award, the first time it had ever been given to a forensic person in the audio field. Most of the people in that group are production people. When you are on TV and you hear the sound, almost for sure somebody's in that society. That's where they all come from. So I gave it on the Kennedy assassination. Yeah. So I'm a member of the International Association for Identification. I'm a distinguished in life active member. This group is involved with a number of forensic disciplines. They're best known for fingerprints. They probably, virtually everybody in the fingerprint field is a member of that society. And many of the crime scene. But they also do video, audio, a number of other fields.
Mr. Koenig, I know we've got a lot of them, and I'm trying to just give a glimpse to the members of the jury. Tell me about your testimony, both for law enforcement, the FBI, as well as for private entities.
In what way?
Well, how many times do you think that you have testified in court and been found to be an expert in the field of audio and video forensic analysis?
This is my 425th time to testify as an expert. Most of those are in courts, but there's some, international arbitration groups and some administrative groups here and there, but the majority would be in a hearing or a trial in a courtroom.
In how many states and how many foreign countries have you testified as an expert in the field of forensic audio and video analysis?
I think I've testified in, I believe, 43 states. The District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, Guam, U.S. Virgin Islands, and Turks and Caicos Islands, Northern Ireland, South Korea, Singapore, the Netherlands, maybe a few more.
Okay. Tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what government agencies you have been called upon to testify and to do video and audio analysis.
Okay, these would be after I left the FBI. So the FBI, we mostly work for federal agencies and state and local. So most of my work, almost all of it, came in from them. So this list would be since I left the FBI.
Post FBI.
Yes.
Okay.
Let me see. Obviously, the U.S. Department of Justice, they use us for almost all the airplane crashes. What happens is if a plane crashes, everybody sues the federal government because they have what they call deep pockets. If you win, they have the money to pay you, basically. Obviously, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, U.S. Congress, Office of Independent Counsel, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, Drug Enforcement Administration, Security and Exchange Commission, U.S. Department of Defense, U.S. Department of Energy, U.S. Customs Service, Federal Trade Commission, United Nations Criminal Tribunal, National Academy of Sciences, U.S. Agency for International Development, District Attorney's Office.
I think we've got enough.
Okay.
Okay. And this was all post-FBI, where they had called on your expertise to assist them in different matters.
That's correct.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as Defense Exhibit, Madam Clerk, BB, and ask you to take a look at this particular exhibit and tell me, Mr. Cohen, do you recognize that exhibit?
Yes, this is my newest, what they call curriculum vitae, my resume, and a list of my recent testimony. And I can even see a typo error. On my testimony, this would be since July of 2014 till the present day.
And who compiled that information on that curriculum vitae for that document?
I did.
You did. And did you keep that particular document as part of your business there at BECTEC?
In our business, that's what, when our clients call, that's what they want. They don't really ask for something else. They want to know, can you send us your CV?
And does that then include all of the areas that you have worked in your career?
Yeah, it's a summary of everything.
Okay. We talked a little bit about your time with the FBI, heading up the lab there for video and audio analysis. I want to talk a little bit about when you retired and what happened when you retired. And I think that goes back now to 1996 to present. Is that correct?
Right. I retired from the FBI the last day of 1995 after 25 years there. Total of 32 years in the federal government. So a lot of years.
And I believe you were still even contracted by the FBI 8 years thereafter because of the level of your expertise.
Yes. If you're an FBI agent, you're not allowed to have outside employment. No exception at all. So the day after I retired, I started my private business. So from there on, I have continued in this field, what I did at the FBI. And even when I was a contractor for the FBI, I was still doing work for other agencies on there. And like I said, I've had a number of different associates, and now Doug Lacey is now, I gave him the business 7 years ago because I like doing casework a lot more than doing invoices and administrative stuff. So he does all that now. It's his business. He's my children's age, so he'll be around. If you call me back in 20 years, it'll be Doug, not me. And so that's what we've done.
And while you were working there in this private entity, or the entity is called BECTEC?
Yeah, BECTEC LLC.
Okay.
All capitals, BEK space TEK space LLC.
And while working for this company now, BECTEC, you continue to do work for the government
Sure.
and for prosecutors and police offices throughout the country.
Yes, our work is complex at times, especially for people that are not into this kind of work. But our work's objective. It's not an opinion. You know, do you get the video stream off so you can play it in court, or you can't? I mean, it's not maybe. So it's much more, even though there's obviously opinions on how to do the work, it's pretty straightforward and it's objective. So therefore, if we got hired from either side in this case and asked to do the same thing, they'd get the same result. They wouldn't change.
Tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what the word forensic means.
It's how science is applied in the legal world. It's the simplest thing.
In the legal world, can we afford to make mistakes?
People sometimes don't understand that. It's a good question. It's you're affecting people's lives. You could theoretically, somebody could be executed if you did the wrong thing, but certainly, you know, I'm not ever telling a jury or a judge what decision they make. That's not my job at all. I don't do that. I want to give them objective, scientific information that they can use to help make their decision in the case.
Let's talk about when our firm hired you. Do you know when that was? Sometime?
Yeah, I think we opened the case something like July 17th of 2014.
Okay. And would you tell
I'm
the
sorry,
ladies-
June 17th.
June. Would you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what it was that you were asked to do in this case by the defense?
Well, I think the general thing was to look at the videos from the movie theater and kind of see what we could do. Can we determine if certain things you see in the video, what they are or not? Be able to prepare video clips that, for instance, slow the information down to make it easier to see. Could we enhance the video? can we pull off individual frames? Videos are composed of a set of still images. It's not, even though you perceive it as being continuous, it's not. It's a series of separate pictures, okay? We can pull all the separate pictures off perfectly without loss. Or you want something circled. But a lot of it, I think, was seeing what was there and what your office had a need to look at, and that's what we looked at.
What is a video made of? I know you talked about individual images, but tell us forensically and scientifically how that is done.
Well, I mean, for instance, you could have a video format, not what's used here, but it's called motion JPEG. So JPEG's the type you take with your camera or your iPhone, okay? You can have video that's a set of JPEGs, and it's called motion JPEG. So it really is a set of pictures, but it's how it's composed is how many pictures you put there. If you're watching something on your high definition TV at home, or you go to the movie theater, you potentially could have 120 pictures in a second, or more. I've seen some stuff with 240 even. Average surveillance video that most people look at, and a lot of TV shows have about 30 pictures per second. Okay. If you get less than that, which a lot of surveillance, sometimes surveillance will be one picture every 5 seconds. Now, in our field, we probably wouldn't call that video, but it's in a video format. It just, the pictures are 5 seconds apart. So, so the composition is how good is the quality of the video you put on there? Usually it's related to pixels. More pixels, things you see blown up, little squares that make it up. The more you have, the better it is. If you used to watch old TV, in my age, when I grew up with, the quality was horrible. And now you all have high definition TV. And if you see an old show where it's the original, it can look miserable. You're thinking, people watch this, So, how many pixels you have? How well do you, if you compress it, in fact, all video is virtually compressed.
Why don't you, please, we're there with the word compressed before we leave it. Tell
Okay.
the jury what compression means.
Compression means you take the image, each image, or the set of images, the better compression systems look at a set of images. You take them and you decide what can you get rid of that's going to have the least effect on the picture. And usually they get rid of the fine detail. So, if you compress it a lot, you have a problem. I'll give you an example. We had a case came in, involved a major Hollywood studio. It was an animated movie involved, and they, believe it or not, contract a lot of it out. They don't even do it in-house, okay? So every place that was doing it was required to have video that would show the tags on all the cars that came in and out of their parking lot, okay? So we get this from this general counsel of this large corporation, and he says, I can't read the tags. We lost a hard drive with the information on it. So we look at it, and if you didn't know where the tag was on a car, you wouldn't know what it was, much less be able to read anything. I mean, the quality was awful. So he goes out to the site, calls me up and said, I'm at the site, the camera's on, and I'm looking at it on the screen, and I can read the tag easily. I said, oh, okay. Record it and now play it back. He plays it back. Oh, it's the same thing. I can't read it anymore. They compressed it so much that you could no longer read the tag. And what's the advantage of compression? The only advantage is it takes less space on a hard drive. So, how did they correct their problem? They didn't store as many days anymore. Cut back on the compression, which the systems can do, and now they can read their tags again. But the person just watching the monitor coming in would say, oh yeah, it's working. And it wasn't. So the compression, we have to live with compression. Even the professionals will use compression. We, in this case, actually did some uncompressed work, but we did that in the lab. Wasn't the original information. So, that's how you look at it. It's how good is the lens on the camera or whatever. how well is the sensor, how many frames there are per second, how many pixels you have. All of these go into what do you end up with.
While we're talking about compression and video systems, describe to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what actually a video system is. What are the components? How does it work? How do we get to that final product?
Okay. Obviously, you have a camera. Okay, camera has a sensor in it. So if the camera, let's say, has a million pixels, that's what it does. It's going to have a sensor up there that's going to detect it at that level. It may not actually have a million sensors. They play tricks with that, but it's caught there. That sensor now takes light from the room, makes it into an electronic signal. Okay, that is fed through a cable, or if it's an iPhone, for instance, it's still kind of a cable, but it's all done internally, to some recording system that then records it, and that system might record, and often does, at a much lower quality than what the camera is. The camera might have 1 million, but they might only use 1/5 of that to save space. And then that's made into a file, and the files will compress. So first off, you've cut potentially what the camera had. You've now compressed it, cut part of it out, and then that's what you end up with as a file.
And this is the inner workings of a video surveillance system.
Correct. And video surveillance systems normally, whether it's a home or at a business, is going to have a hard drive. That's what they use. It's an internal hard drive, computer drive.
Is that in the DVR?
What you call a DVR, or what you have at home to record TV shows when you're not there, DVR. That's what it does. It just brings the data in, puts it on a hard drive, indexes it so you can find it.
And do those systems have what we call proprietary software, and how does that proprietary software work?
I want to say most. Once in a while we get one without proprietary. A non-proprietary video means you can take the file, put it in your computer, and it plays. Windows Media or whatever you use, it'll play it. Most surveillance systems aren't that way. They're proprietary. Best we can find out for the manufacturers is they don't want to pay the cost of using a standardized format. But they never say. So then we have to try to get it off. It's what I talked about earlier. If you have the right codec and instructions, information, you can pull it off. The non-proprietary, it's already in your computer. It's an MP4, your computer knows what to do with it. So the codec is already there. So we often, in fact almost all the time, have to try to figure out the best way to pull that off. Some are simple. We can go in and find the stream. Others, we have the codec. We pull it off. Sometimes we just play tricks pulling it off. But we want to get it off with no loss. That's a big one. I mean, the last thing you have that if you can no way do it, you'd have to copy it off a real high quality monitor. That's a last resort. I don't think in the last 3 years we've actually had a case, all the cases we've gotten in, we've had to do that. But that's always a last resort to get it off.
Is there, in your work and the work that you do in pulling that information, that video off of the system, if you don't use the proprietary software, are you degrading, altering, changing the video in any way?
If you don't have it, you won't even play. You get the file, the programs just say they can't play the file.
Okay. Let's talk about motion sensors and being able to determine how much those sensors are set at the time of the recording. Tell me how motion sensors work.
Motion sensors are, I think, even home systems all have them now, so it's a very common thing. You can set it for the whole picture. So in other words, you could do that. Or you could set it for one little part. You could set it for this wall, which doesn't move, and that means it'll never record. Or you can say, I got a picture of the whole room I want. Anybody moves in the room, do it. So in a surveillance like a business, let's say you have one on the side of a building, but there's one door on the whole side of the building. You don't care if somebody walks across the lawn or whatever. You could have the motion sensor set just for that door. So then it doesn't make any recordings unless there's somebody moving in there, in that area that you've done. You can usually set the sensitivity of it. You don't want to be in a position that, the wind blows a leaf through there, for instance, and it records. You don't want to do that. So it's kind of, each time has to be set up by the user to find what works. And you don't want it to run when you don't want it to run. Why take up a bunch of your hard disk space when all it is an empty hallway? So it depends on how the person sets it up.
So sensitivity, let's talk about sensitivity. So are you telling me then that someone can actually set the sensitivity of that recording surveillance video, and then it would only record when it reaches that level of sensitivity?
Right, most systems would have that, yes.
Okay, and so are you able to tell what that sensitivity level is or setting is if you had the DVR system in front of you for you to analyze that?
Yes, you would go into the settings and you can pull up each camera. A lot of these systems have 20 and 30 cameras. You can pull up each camera, set where it's going to look for it, and the sensitivity of each camera. Very simple. It's not a complicated thing to do.
And so, for example, if the DVR system there at the Cobb Theater was gotten rid of, meaning it was no longer available, are you able to determine the sensitivity of that system without those DVRs in place?
Normally not. It's not included. I don't know I've ever seen it actually included in any metadata of a surveillance system. But it's in the settings of the DVR itself.
So what do you do if it's not included in the metadata and you really need to find out how much movement was necessary for the video camera to actually start recording? I mean, what do you do?
You can't find that out. Not as a statement. No, you could look at what video you have and say, okay, it seems to me that unless somebody's moving over here, it starts it. But since the other part is not being recorded, you're not seeing the video where it doesn't record. You only see the video where it does record. So you can have something that it's an hour time and there's only 14 seconds of video on that.
Now, these systems that we're talking about, video surveillance systems, do they tell you on the system, on the film itself, when they are recording and when they're not recording?
I mean, they don't tell you directly. They just stop recording there. So some, like your systems, actually, the exact time is in the data. There's another stream that has that. Not all systems have that. So in this case, we could tell you the exact times it cuts off and on. Most systems, you can't. Other than often the biggest thing we see, it's on the screen. So that'll tell you. But the screen might only be in seconds. Might not be like this one out to probably milliseconds. So on there. So if there's nothing on the screen, and it's not one of those that happens to have it in the metadata, then you don't have any information at all.
Now, some of these systems actually put out a black screen or a blue screen, the proprietary systems, when it is not recording. Is that correct?
When you play back, it actually doesn't have that in the file. The file says, we stop recording here, and when that happens, the system says what it's going to do. Put black, blue, whatever they do. And then when it starts recording again, it does. But the recording itself doesn't just specifically say, oh, I'm going to put black ones in here, because that takes up space. So they just say, oh, after this, do this. Simple command. When it comes back up, it comes back and records. Yeah.
And do some systems, instead of putting those screens, do they actually duplicate the last image that was recorded and continue with that image despite the fact that it's not recording?
Yes, I would say that's more common than ever seeing a black screen.
Explain that to the jury, how that works and how that can lead someone to be confused.
Well, I'm recording this gentleman here, and I have it there, and he stops moving. Or the part for movement is over there someplace, so he's out of it. And then it has him just standing there, right there. So then all the frames are identical, and then all of a sudden, he's over here. So you're like, okay, you don't know what he did between here and here, but when this last frame was there, which kept repeating, the next new frame, he was over here.
Why do these systems do that? It appears confusing, right?
It's saving space. Why would you use motion detection if you weren't trying to save space? It's like compression or making the pixels smaller. Less space on the hard drive is taken up.
Now, tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how we extract that video from a hard drive or from a system.
In this particular case.
Yes. Just briefly. In fact, let me, before we get to that, let's talk about the issue of a digital image. And let's get to that first, and then we can go and explain the extraction process.
Okay.
Please tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what a digital image is.
Okay. There's kind of two types here, and I'll talk about the image, and the other one is a clone, okay? An image is a algorithm that goes in with a hard drive or a thumb drive, flash drive, any digital media you want. It makes a copy of it in a way that you get everything off of it. I mean, if the thing had nothing on it, it would just copy the whole thing. If it's a 5 terabyte hard drive with nothing on it, it'll copy nothing, but it'll have a complete picture of the whole thing. The advantage is we can then pull the stuff off without having to go through some program that might change it or do something. It's all there. And so it's just an exact scientific copy of it. A clone copies it all, but in a kind of a different way. The scientific clone is useful in the sense that, let's say, I had a case in which we had to give a copy to somebody else. The attorneys needed one copy. And they wanted to be able, and they also wanted to be able to put it back in the DVR. We don't recommend, we believe the hard drive should come out and never be used again if it's forensic, period. Okay? Well, what if you want to get in there and get, like talked about, the settings or something, okay? And some of them require you put the hard drive back in. You can make a clone of it that will now play in the unit because it's identical to the other one, but the original is still untouched. So anybody in the future can always look at that original. They have to. And you're going to have an image of it, and if you need it, you have a clone of it.
Okay. And so let's talk a little bit about this process where a video is nothing but a series of images. Is that correct?
Series of?
Of images.
Oh,
Video.
yes.
Okay. And let's talk about if we want to extract one of those images, where do we put it? I mean, how do we extract it, and where do we put it if we want to extract it in a file?
Yes. You can, if you have the proper file, depends on the file, you can use programs, and there's a number of them out there, that will actually extract that image. You say, I want this image on my screen to be extracted. It doesn't extract it off the screen, it extracts it right out of the file. And then they put that into a image file. In our field, we normally always use uncompressed, so we wouldn't make a JPEG of it. The big ones are bitmap and TIFF, T-I-F-F, and PNG.
Okay, and those are those are files that do not compress the image, is that correct?
Well, the PNG technically compresses it, but it's in a way that we call lossless. In other words, there's no loss from it. It just makes the file a little bit smaller.
Okay. Let's talk about pixels and how that relates to an image. If you'd like, I'm going to have you step down and describe that to the jury on our whiteboard.
Okay.
Can you, Your Honor, may I have the witness step down?
Yeah, is
After
this,
this segment, we can break,
okay.
and then we'll start with the videos.
All right, thank you. Yes, he can step down. Yes, you may.
I'm not going to forget. It's not complicated. I've seen on TV now, the big thing in the movies is they have an image, you can't see something, and they blow it up and it pixelizes, and they hit a magic button. Guess what? You can't do the magic button part. So in other words, you have an image, and it's made up of pixels. Okay? So, and this goes all the way down, pixel after pixel. Okay, each pixel, like this over here, is a square or a rectangle normally. It is either a color throughout, or it's a grayscale, somewhere between black and white. Okay? There is no additional data in there other than that. In other words, can sometime in the future they use some specialized stuff and take this pixel and get more information in it? The answer is no. In other words, there is no more information. It's just a color or a grayscale, period, the whole thing. So, the less pixels you have, the less detail you can do. You know, if you wanted to say, I got, trying to think of something. Oh, just make a circle. Okay? Well, what if I only had one pixel to cover? What would the pixel look like? It would look like a square. Okay, well, what if I had 4 pixels? Okay, remember, all of these are going to be some grayscale or color. They can't put that line there. This is all going to be some color. This is going to be some different color. It can't draw lines. It would just be 4 areas of gray or 4 areas of color. So in other words, you'd have to have enough that you could start defining it. So you now need to have pixels, you know, probably down in this range before you can start saying it's a circle. So, but like I said, what you see on TV, there's no more stuff in the pixel. Pixel's it. If you, this case, I think we have what, 76,800 pixels on there. Now, to give you an idea, my iPhone, I don't have anything special, has 12 million pixels. A high definition on TV you watch all the time, each frame is about 2 million. And if you go to 4K or something, this could be 12 million or more, as you might see at the movie theater. That's why you get the detail. So, in this case, we're dealing with this many. That's not very many pixels. So that's why you can't define things well.
In this particular video that we have, this video from the video surveillance system at the cop theater, why is it that it's not clear?
Pixels. How do you make something that looks like a circle if you don't have enough pixels to make it look like a circle? So you end up with, you can't define things. So unless it's something larger that has enough pixels, and even then you won't see a lot of detail in a larger thing, but at least you can say, well, that's a person, for instance. Yeah, you can do that. So the limitation is this. You're dealing with 320 by 240 pixels, if I remember right. And so that's all you're getting. On a high definition TV, you're up around, you know, 2,000 by 1,000, something like that for $1 million, or to get the, 2 million here. So you just don't have enough thing. Even the old TV, believe it or not, old TV was 480 by 640. So you can see this is, twice here, so this is 4 times better than this. And that's that old TV which used to watch. So it tells you how poor the quality is, that the system definitely can do much better than that, no matter what system it was, but they didn't.
And again, it's a cost saving for the manufacturer of the,
Saving of hard disk space, yes.
okay, you may take your seat. Donna, if you want to take a break, it's probably, there's a little bit more information, and then we're going to go to the videos, but we can certainly do that now at the corporate light.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead and take a 10-minute recess. Just be back to the jury pool room in 10 minutes or so. Thank you. Remember my instructions.
All rise for the recess for 10 minutes. Jury is out.
Thank you.
It doesn't have to be on the record.
Okay. All right, are we ready to start the other part?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, you're going to have him up there more?
No, we got a bit more instructions on what he did forensically to the Q6, which is going to be the imaged hard drive. And then once we get through that, we're going to move that forward slightly.
Okay.
I'm going to have him, with the board's permission, move here so that he can see the actual video while we're playing the video and explain certain segments of it.
Okay.
Is that okay with the
All
board?
right, yeah, and everything that he's going to do comports with Judge Lewis's ruling
There's been no ruling from Judge Lewis
on
his,
Mr. Koenig?
on his testimony.
That's correct.
Okay. Was there hearing on his?
It's not on his.
Oh, okay.
No,
All right, because I have,
that was on Knox, the crime scene
No,
expert.
that was Emil.
No, I'm saying
Yeah.
she was wondering if there had ever been a motion on an expert that wasn't what we've talked about. That was
Okay.
Knox.
okay. Knox, we still have to hear, I know.
Yes,
And Mr. Emmel was ruled on.
right.
Okay, but there was no Daubert on Mr. Koenig? Okay. I know I've reviewed his testimony recently.
He testified for us in the Emil issue.
Okay, that's what it was.
Right.
That's what it was. I knew
If
I'd
that's-
seen it
yes.
recently.
Yes, he
his
testified
testimony and-
for us,
okay.
but it wasn't
Okay.
against him.
Okay, that's where the issue
That's
was.
one of the same truth here.
Yes.
I'm not gonna identify anything, just.
No, he's not. Your Honor, just so the court knows, forensic experts like Mr. Koenig, they don't identify what's in the video. That's left up to the jury. All he's going to do is he's going to tell the jury what he did,
Okay.
obviously, to these videos in order to play them as they're going to be played.
Okay. All right. Brandon.
Jurors in the courtroom, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Jurors may be seated. All jurors are present and accounted for.
Thank you, Deputy. Ladies and gentlemen, were you all able to abide by my instructions during the recess? All right, very good. Thank you. Mr. Escobar?
Thank you. Mr. Koenig, the imaged hard drive that you received concerning the cop theater videos, did you label that Q6?
Yes, specimen Q6, that's the system the FBI uses, and we've continued it. Q means a question piece of evidence, so this would be the sixth one we received from your office.
Okay. And so let's talk a little bit about what you did in reference to that video surveillance, and we're going to talk about things concerning forensically enlarging and forensically enhancing a video surveillance actual video. Please tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what enhancement means.
Enhancement, you're talking about video enhancement,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay. Is to try to make the scene easier to see. You're stuck with a number of pixels. You can't change how many pictures you have per second, but you try to so in this case, basically, I think all of them were done this way. We lightened the dark areas. There's a tool in Photoshop called shadow highlight. So you can either take the highlights that are very white and make them less white, or you can take the darkest areas and make it light. It doesn't affect the whole picture, just those areas. This one, the highlights, we did virtually nothing on. So we made it lighter. What happens with the compression, that one of the side effects of it is it lowers the contrast of the picture, because they can, again, make the image smaller. So we improved the contrast. Didn't have to be drastic, just some. And then we sharpened it Now, but sharpen it just means you're getting the edges of the pixels perfectly straight. So it has a more minor effect on overall, but it has an effect. So the enhancement for everything that was done here, that's all that was done. So it is an improvement, but there's just a limit to what you can do with this quality.
Is there a measure that you can identify as to what you actually did, for example, in enhancing? Meaning, is it a ascertainable change in the video itself?
Yes, you can see it and somebody can repeat it. We have the exact numbers. Photoshop gives you numbers. Somebody could take our system, one of our images, put it in Photoshop and do exactly what we did. No problem at all.
And they would know exactly what you did in enhancing that particular image?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you talked about compression. The compression that you were talking about, was that the compression that was taking place by the system itself, the surveillance system?
Correct.
Not by any compression that you were doing?
That's correct.
Because you didn't do any compression.
Well, the only compression we have to do is when you enhance the video and you want to make another video copy of it, which you have to do, what we do is we make it, let's say the compression made the file 500 kilobytes in size. We would use a compression that would make the file 5 or 6 times larger than that. So it means virtually there's no loss. The individual still images we can pull off with no effect at all. But the video, you'd be hard pressed to know that we did anything in the way of compression based on what it's there.
Enlargement. Describe and explain to the jury what that means, magnification or enlargement of the video.
I mean, it generally means you've got an image that I had up there, 240 by 320, and you want to make it something bigger than that. Because you want to make it so it's maybe easier to see in court. You want to make a print, whatever. You can make it. You can add pixels to make that happen.
Is there a proper way of enhancing forensically, of enlarging forensically, that you adhere to?
Yes, and it's what the books and everything else say too. It's not just our
Your
opinion.
Honor, I object,
You want to approach?
please.
So, Mr. Koenig, in this enlargement process, what process is it that you use in an effort to enlarge an image or a video?
It's called, it's a nearest neighbor is the name of the algorithm, but it has to be done in a certain mathematical way so it doesn't change the original image.
Your Honor, may I ask the witness to step down to demonstrate nearest neighbor for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
Yes. Is he going to stay down for a while, or?
He's going to demonstrate it on the board. It'd probably be, I would imagine, 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay. All right, we'll reposition.
Mr. Koenig, please describe to the ladies and gentlemen what you mean by nearest neighbor enlargement or magnification.
Okay. Let's make a very simple thing here. I just, 4 pixels in a square, call them A, B, C, D. I want to make this larger into a square that's I apologize for my lack of artistic ability. So, how do I make this bigger without changing what's there? I only have 4 pixels, and now I want to make it 16 pixels. Or I can make it whatever. The way to do it is nearest neighbor, if you do it, as long as you go in integers, in other words, double it each side, triple each side, make it 40, make it 100, doesn't matter. So what happens when you do that, it makes this. And I have no idea why I'm not doing it differently. It's green and black. So in other words, you now have taken this 1 pixel and made it into 4. It's still the same square, it's just a bigger square. And the same thing with C, D, and E. And you can do this to any size as long as you're doubling. In other words, so we went from, this was 2 by 2. You could make this, 4 by 4, and on up. So as long as you continue to end up with squares, that you can make all the pixels identical, and the algorithm does it perfectly. So basically when you do this, all of these A's are going to be absolutely identical to each other. So it'll be larger. You don't gain any detail. It's not an enhancement process. It just makes it so. So in this one we have a small amount of pixels, but Mr. Escobar's office decided he would like to put it up on a big screen for courtroom. So we made the images to blow up so they fit better on this. And again, we're still limited. If we said he wanted to make this 5 by 5, we'd have a trouble because we couldn't make the squares. So it's got to be, we always say, 1, 2 squared, 3 squared, 4 squared. If you do that, you can constantly make it this way. There's no loss of information, but it makes it much bigger. And so instead of seeing on this big thing a picture that's maybe this size, you're going to see it to be that size. And it's exactly the same as the original.
So let's talk a little bit about, you talked earlier to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury about grayscale and color.
Correct.
Tell me how a nearest neighbor works with that issue of grayscale and color.
It doesn't care what A is. It just makes identical copies of it. So whatever the pixel is, it does. Color, black and white, doesn't matter.
Okay. Are there other ways of enlarging an image or a video that are not forensically acceptable, forensically?
Yes.
And would you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury those particular ways and why they're not forensically acceptable?
Okay. You keeping this or?
No.
Okay.
Hold on, now, let me see if I can get you to black.
Okay. So What if we start again with A, B, C, C. And we want to make it now okay, so we're going in these methods, you don't need to have it be a certain anything. So we want to make it look like this. So now I've got, basically if I take what's originally over here, I've got A there and I got B here. I might not be counting these right. This is C and D. Okay. It doesn't do what the other one did, where we duplicated. It makes, based on the algorithm, guesses. So this is going to be A1, A2. This is probably going to be something like an AB. In other words, the machine, computer is just going to decide, saying, okay, if this is black and this is white, well, I'm going to make these gray. But if this is red and this one is green, then it's going to put some colors in between. It doesn't know what you're taking a picture of. It doesn't know if you have lines. It doesn't do any of that. It's not like a human being that might actually do what I just said. It's like, oh yeah, there's a line there, so probably the line should continue over. But you don't know if the original here, let's say, was a line like this and a line like this. Well, it's got to decide, how do you blend from this to this? So it's going to do something in between. So in other words, all of these are guesses. All these blank areas do it. So you could end up, in a case, you could have one A and you've added 50 extra pixels, none of which existed in the original at all. Or the other way I do it, it's there. If you do these kind of techniques, overall what it does, it softens the picture. So it doesn't actually add detail, but it will change what things look like. You can have something that's kind of squarish and now it's not. Or, it changes things.
Let's talk about that issue of the algorithm, because I think that's an important topic. When you're doing it not the way you're doing it, forensically nearest neighbor, where you're doing it with bicubic or bicubic smoother and all the other algorithms, are you aware of what that algorithm is actually doing in order to enlarge the photo?
In a way you do, in a way you don't.
Okay.
Basically the algorithm, like these kind of things, is mathematical. Somebody has made up a mathematical thing that says, okay, if you got this and this, do that. But there's nothing into that algorithm that tells you what you're doing. Is this a person's face you're looking at? Are you looking at vertical lines? Are you looking at a baseball field? It has none of that data. So it's meant to be extremely general. So if you must blow up something for a family picture or something, it's not forensic. You just try the various ones and see if you like one better than the other. It's not going to make the picture better. Like I said, it'll soften the picture. Like anything that's a straight line will now start looking less straight.
But there's no way of actually verifying what that algorithm did on that particular image.
Well, you could take what you started with. In fact, some of the algorithms don't even use the original pixels. I mean, they start there, but that original pixel may not even actually exist in there, depending on the algorithm.
And you can return. With you using nearest neighbor, can anyone come behind you and verify what you've done?
Yes, I mean, they're exactly copying the original pixels in a square.
Okay. Tell me what the word interpolation means.
It means you're interpreting, I mean, it's kind of how the word is, this algorithm is interpreting what these extra pixels that never existed in the original would be.
And so bicubic or bicubic smoother, those are the ones that have the algorithms that are out there and you don't know
Right,
much about?
they're very commonly used, but not forensically.
And they are interpolating that enlargement.
Yes, the algorithm is guessing what those pixels should be without having any knowledge of what the picture is.
Why is it that these companies don't give you exactly what they're doing with these algorithms? Why don't they give you all the formula so that you can actually see it and determine whether what they're doing is accurate or not? What's the reason?
Well, some of them, there's some general formulas out there for them, but they, even though I have a very...
Photoshop just calls for speculation.
It does not.
Basically, they'll give you some of the general formulas, all Photoshop and all make up their own, modify them, but they're mathematical. They assign numbers to things and then do it. So you could potentially compute the numbers, but the numbers don't tell you what the end up picture is. It just says, oh, well, we're going to give it this number, and that's it. And then, like you said, every company uses their own, they modify the general formulas.
And that's because it's proprietary to them, right? Their product.
Yeah, they want to have their product that they like the look of. So let's say, a company thinks they mostly do landscapes. So they might modify it in their program so that they think for a landscape it seems to do the best job. Or if somebody's only doing portraits, maybe they could do it. But most of these programs do everything. They're not really aimed at one particular type of image.
Okay. Now, can interpolation occur by some other means? For example, by the screen itself that you're displaying your image or your video?
Say that again?
Can interpolation take place by other means, by the screen itself that you're playing your image or video?
Yeah, if you tell the screen, if it has that capability, to make it larger, it will.
Okay, and so you know the size of the images that we have here, the size of the video, right?
Right.
And how small is that size?
It was 320 by 240
And would you
pixels.
give the jury some indication of what that would be in size, in size as far as number of pixels? 76?
76,800.
Okay.
You multiply the two numbers together.
Okay, and so when you're playing or displaying an image or video on a screen, do you have to be careful because the screen itself may interpolate?
Absolutely.
And explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury why that is a concern sometimes.
Well, it's what I said. In other words, they're not going to use nearest neighbor using exactly squared off pixels. You've got to make it do that. So these other ones, they're going to use whatever system they decide to use. They may not even tell you what it is, and they'll just blow it up. So you can end up with, the vast majority of the pixels are never from the original. They might only be, original might only have 1% of the pixels or something from it. So you don't know what you're getting. Like I said, it's guessing what it is. It can change the shapes of things completely. You wouldn't even recognize what it was before. If you use it in small amounts, obviously that makes less of a difference than if you have lots. So if you just wanted to go from 76,000 and make it 150,000, well, there would be differences, but they would be minor. But as you take more and more extra pixels, it's guessing even farther out. Like, here's a pixel here and here, and I got to put 10 extra pixels in there.
So correct me if I'm wrong, let me see if I understand this. You can actually interpolate by using software, for example, bicubic or bicubic smoother, where you're actually trying to enlarge the image or video. And then there's a second way, which is just displaying an image on the screen that will interpolate in and of itself.
That's correct. It's like, if you have like most high-definition TVs, I think most people nowadays do, you have an option that says, whatever's there, make it fit on the screen. It's not an option I personally like. I guess I'm more technical, but for that. But if you do that, if your screen is this big and the original image is this big, it's going to make it fit. So everybody's TV nowadays has that capability, just about.
And so here we have a big screen. It's my big screen, right?
Your
And
big
so,
screen.
Tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what you did in an effort to prevent this screen from interpolating on its own.
We blew the video up, and how we did this, so we didn't lose anything. The original files of the Q6, I don't know what the exhibit is, but Q6, were in a AVI format, okay? That's just a dot AVI at the end. Okay, that is what we call a container format. In other words, you can have all kinds of formats in them. So you might have an AVI file that plays fine on your computer, or you might have a file that will never play on it. Okay? We then took that, and the player that comes with it, it's a Geo Vision, I think it is, yeah. It's all one word, capital GEO, capital VISION. Player has very limited capability. You can play, but we want to get the thing off. We used a different program, and I'll spell that. It's Graphic, Graph, G-R-A-P-H, no space, capital S-T-U-D-I-O, no space, capital N-E-X-T. Graph Studio Next. Okay. It's a program that you can say, I have this file, and I'd like to play it back. So it looks for a codec, as we call it, that will know that. Well, we have the GeoVision codec. So then we pull it off in an uncompressed format. That means no loss. It's a huge file because you're not compressing it. It's huge. We then can use that to make the videos we do, the still images we do, and again, other than the only time we have to recompress it is when we have enlarged it or something and we want a video, we do it. We just, again, do it at such a low compression level that you probably couldn't tell the difference. So that's how we pull it off without having any tools from GeoVision that can really do what we want it to do. So we can pull it off separately with its different software.
Now, let's talk about tools of GeoVision and tools of the software that you used. Is there a reason why you used tools that you used in this particular case that were not GeoVision?
Well, GeoVision, there's no way to pull it off in super high quality. They just pull it off so that an end user can look at the video. Here we want to do it perfectly, no loss. So we need a tool that's going to allow us to bring it off with no loss. And this is one of those kind of tools that allow us to pull it off, no loss, no more compression, everything's there.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as Defense Exhibit AA and ask you if you recognize this particular exhibit, Mr. Cohen.
I do.
And what is that an exhibit of?
Yeah, this is a MOV file. That's at the end, the suffix, .mov. Shows a timeline, obviously, that you've dictated for that.
Okay, and did you view that particular thumb drive to determine whether that thumb drive came from the Q6 imaged hard drive of the Cobb Theater?
Yes, the original came from that.
And does
Correct.
that thumb drive contain a fair and accurate depiction of what you pulled from that hard drive in that thumb drive?
Yes.
Your Honor, we would move this AA into evidence.
Any objection?
Madam Clerk, would you like to have them individually bring them to you, or do you want all seven at one time once it's? Your Honor, we would move this into evidence. I would imagine that would be defense exhibit number
Yeah.
1. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is it possible for me to do it all at one time once they're all introduced? Can I do that?
I got the list right here that I can mark on this, if I'm done.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. It just saves time me going back and forth. Mr. Thunderberg, would you, may I display the?
Yes. You
Thank you.
ready for that? For everybody to rearrange?
We are ready.
Was that gonna get any closer, or?
I'm planning to bring that up to Mr. Thunderberg in just a second.
Is that at number 1 now, Ted?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I also ask Mr. Koenig to please step down so that he can testify from a position where he can actually hear the video?
Yes.
And may I move as well?
Yes.
I think my voice is loud enough to be from here. Is that okay, then? Yeah. Just go ahead and get it started. Yeah.
Mr. Escobar,
Yes.
can you swing one of those microphones that's in front of the jury box? Look over this, or there, either one. There's one right in front,
That good?
these guys, over towards
Oh,
your seat.
to me?
Yeah. That might pick up a little better. There we go. Thank you.
Now, Mr. Koenig, what is this video mentioning at this point in time?
Now, this is talking about various clips, video clips, from the Q6 camera views that show the movement of the defendant throughout the theater.
And the issue of down here where it says it has been resized 200%, explain that to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
Yeah, they've been blown up to be larger. Most of these, to give you an idea, we were at, 320 by 240. These have been made to fit at 3840 by 2160 pixels. Again, no more information, just making it easier to see.
Okay. Mr. Thunderberg. Now, Dr. Matt, explain this particular screen concerning this video.
This is kind of rare. Most clocks and DVRs, the timers, sync for all the cameras. It's one system. Theirs doesn't. It's just how it is. So if you see that, you'll see the times at the bottom. I think they're at the bottom of these. And if you notice carefully, you'll see that times go on, even though you know it's later, it might be a time that's actually slightly earlier than the previous one. And that's just what's on the system.
Your Remember, this will approximately be 18 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Stop there for a second. Now, Mr. Koenig, what does this mean? We're seeing a black screen and it says no recording, next image in, now it's in milliseconds, right?
This is two reasons this can happen. The main one is the motion detection says whatever they're reading says nobody's moving. So it just stops recording. And then it picks up. Second, it's less of a problem with most of these, but some of them, when they come back up, instead of being at 30 frames or images per second, is only at 10. So basically you get these real short ones, where basically it's not recording for small periods of time. The longer ones are, as you see.
And who is inserting this, this black screen here with the identification to the viewer?
We are. We're trying to make it so people understand that it's not actually black. It didn't record black. It just didn't record anything.
And so when it doesn't record anything, you're putting in this black screen to identify that it's not being recorded and when the next image for recording would come?
Yeah, we put that in if it's long enough. If it's real short, we don't, but yeah.
Go ahead, Mayor. stop right there. Now, Mr. Koenig, what have you done here in having this process here with Cam 12, which would be the left side of the theater, is that correct, as you're facing the screen, and Cam 11 on the right side?
Correct. We're showing the same area, but from opposite directions. It'd be like having a camera here and then one over there. You see the same, all of you in the jury, and the judge, but to different angles.
Matt, stop there for a second. You know, Mr. Koenig, we haven't seen any video recording for quite some time. Does that mean that nobody was moving at all? Or does that mean that the sensor wasn't picking whatever movement was taking place?
The answer to the second one, either the sensor didn't pick it up, but more than likely, it's the sensitivity itself was set. It required more movement than that to have something happen. Or, especially on the one on the left, the one, it might have been looking toward the center of the picture where nobody was sitting. So in that area, it's looking at, nobody moves. To them, there's nothing there. So it depends on, again, how it was set up, the original settings of the system.
And so the positioning of the cameras obviously would be important.
What?
The positioning of the cameras.
Well, I mean, I guess the motion sensor doesn't care where you put the camera. In a sense, it's going to do that. But the cameras themselves are positioned to where somebody decided they wanted.
True, Matt. portion from here of Mr. Koenig?
Yeah, does it require the screen?
Yeah, we got another exhibit coming up. And if you could, put it, take that one. Can I approach you on it?
Yeah.
Mr. Koenig, I'm going to approach you and ask you to take a look at Exhibit II and tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury whether you recognize Exhibit II.
I do.
And how is it that you recognize that exhibit?
This is from Q6.
And do you have your initials on that?
I do.
And have you reviewed that particular thumb drive with its contents to determine whether it fairly and accurately depicts the contents that was in Q6?
I have, and it does.
And Q6 being the image hard drive from the Cop Theater video system on January the 13th of 2014.
Correct.
Okay. Your Honor, may I publish it? We would move to introduce this as evidence. Mr. Martin?
No objection. How long is this one, Mr.?
Your Honor, I will promise you that this one, we're not going to allow the blacks to just linger. We're going to move to the significant portions of this video, but it'll go probably a bit quicker.
All right.
We would move II into evidence. Number two? Okay. Thanks. Stop right there, man. Mr. Koenig, what is this a video of?
This is one of the portions on Cam 11. We call that the right side of the theater interior. This is playing back at 1/4 speed. So the original was 20 seconds, it's now 80 seconds in time. It's played back. It's been enhanced as best you can with this stuff. And we have still the time captions that monitor.
And it's magnified 200%?
100%. And I should note that before the time, you probably won't realize this now, it's minutes, colon, seconds, dot, and then milliseconds on it.
Go forward to the relevant part. Go forward to the relevant.
Go, I'll tell you when to.
Oh.
Stop there, Matt. And Mr. Koenig, this is what you meant by slowing it down, 25% of the rate, is that
It's
correct?
1/4 of the normal speed.
Okay, and that's to be able to focus and see it in a much slower manner?
Yeah, any of the action shots can now be seen slower. So sometimes in real time, it's so fast you don't catch everything.
Go ahead, Matt. Okay, Matt, next relevant section. Yeah. approach? Mr. Koenig, I'm going to show you what's been marked as defense exhibit number X, and have you take a look at exhibit number X, and tell me if you recognize exhibit number X.
I do.
And how is it that you recognize that exhibit?
This label's been initialed and dated by me.
And have you viewed that particular thumb drive and to try to match it up with the portions in Q6 that correspond to that thumb drive?
Correct.
And does that thumb drive contain a fairly accurate depiction of what was in Q6?
Correct.
We would move defense exhibit X into evidence.
Exhibit number 3.
It would be entered as number 3. Thank you, Your Honor. May I publish it?
Yes.
Hey, Matt, stop there, please. Mr. Koenig, what is this video of, and what is being done to this video in order to play it for the members of the jury?
Again, cam 11 is, as you look at the screen, it's on the right side. Again, we've inserted black frames in there and put the, overlaid the actual time on the screen.
Okay. Wait a minute. Okay, that's okay, Matt, you're good, you're good. Go ahead, Matt, and move it forward to the relevant sections. Okay, Matt, next relevant section. Okay, stop there for a second. The second video clip in that particular exhibit is what? What are we doing with that video clip on that
Both
second?
the first one and this one there are, we use the word direct means it's not enhanced. It's a direct copy of it. The first one was no magnification. This one has 200% magnification.
next relevant section, Matt, please. Okay, Matt, next relevant section. Stop there. Mr. Koenig, what is this clip that we're about to show the ladies and gentlemen of the jury? How did we enhance it or magnify this one?
This is exactly the same as the last one, it's magnified, but this is enhanced, and you'll see basically the darker areas will be lighter.
Matt, if you can use your magic and stop it where you want to stop it, right?
You can stop. I'll go to the next relevant.
No, stay there. Yeah, I just want you to stop. It's kind of this.
Oh, okay.
Okay, stop it right there, man. Now, Mr. Koenig, at a later point in time in these videos, did we ask you to focus on certain areas of the video that we believe were important?
Yes.
Wrong color.
Is this an area that we asked you to look at in the video with a bit closer look in other clips?
Correct.
Okay. Wait a minute. Next relevant area, Matt. Please. Okay. So what did we do here on this particular clip for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
We wanted to center on that area that you identified as of interest to you. So this area is magnified and enhanced, but it's centered over in that area.
Matt, when we stop it also at the magic place. consistent area that we asked you to focus on in the videos of the cop theater?
Correct.
And was there another area that was either a light source or a reflective source that we were interested in as well?
That's correct.
And later clips, you focused on those two particular areas?
Yes.
Go ahead, Matt. Stop, Matt. Now, those areas that I circled were approximately 8 seconds before the next clip that we're seeing with the alleged popcorn. Is that correct?
That sounds correct.
So 8 seconds at least passed between when you see that area that we were focusing on and the popcorn and the hands coming forward, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Go ahead, Matt. Stop. And you may have to go back. We'll do it on the next one. No big deal, Matt. Go ahead. Next relevant, read my mind. Mr. Koenig, on this particular video clip, what are we doing?
Same as the last one. We have enhancement, same area, still centered on the area your office is designated. And this will be double the magnification for 200 to 400.
Matt, I want you to stop it again at its place when we... Okay. Mr. Koenig, is that an area that we asked you to focus on in this particular video from the cop theater at a later clip?
You did.
And likewise, did we ask you to focus on that particular area of the video of the cop theater?
You did.
And can you tell, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, how many pixels are depicted in the smaller circle area that I have just pointed out to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
Lighted pixels here is a total of 6 pixels.
That means that that is a rectangle, 6
Yes.
pixels? And again, this is a depiction of some movement at least 8 seconds before, oh, the judge wants to see. Sorry. This is a depiction of movement at least 8 seconds before we first see the hand moving forward on the next series of images. Is that correct?
Approximately, yes.
Stop, Matt. Right there. Stop. Mr. Koenig, later on, did we ask you to pull some PNG individual images in order to capture a movement that we believed was Mr. Reeves's?
I'm not going to object to testifying.
Did we ask you to pull some individual images? I will rephrase you on some individual images in order to take a look at the area of the left side of Mr. Reeves's face.
We were asked to pull the still images. We pulled them off without any change, and made a PNG again. There's an uncompressed, slightly compressed, but it's a lossless format. In other words, it doesn't compress it, it doesn't change it.
And we'll be playing those later. Go ahead, man.
We should note that when the gun went off,
Yeah,
that's dust coming down.
Excuse me.
Stop, man, for a second.
You going to ask him a question?
I can, yeah.
Yeah.
We see a bunch of bubbles. Would you please tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what those bubbles possibly reflect?
Sorry.
Yes.
Yes, we fired a shockwave. They probably don't dust the ceiling in the theater very often, and that's what came down.
Go ahead, man. Next relevant section. Okay, so on this particular video clip, what are we doing, Mr. Koenig, in order to describe what the jury is about to see?
It's the same as the very last one, large magnification, centered on the appropriate area you've designated, but it's playing back at 1/2 speed.
Okay, Matt? And stop it at the appropriate areas, Matt, okay? Those are two areas that later on we've asked you to focus on and provide us some film of those two particular areas.
You did, yes.
And well, we'll talk about them when we get there. Matt, can you go back just a little bit on that? I want to ask. Oh. All right. Okay, right there. Did you do any work in an effort to try to focus on that light source, whether it was reflective or a light itself? Did you do any work specifically to try to enhance and magnify and have a focus on that particular area?
Yes, we looked at it. I mean, you can't really directly tell.
And tell me why a forensic expert like yourself cannot tell what that is.
Well, I guess first off, I don't have magic eyes. Every one of you can look at the video and see what's there. I can measure things, pull them off, do things like that. You can't. Well, maybe some of you can. But we can only tell you what's there. You can see this as well as I can see it. And there's nothing I can measure. It's 6 pixels. It's in a rectangle. It's obviously lighter than the background. But beyond that, I can't say.
Go ahead, Matt. stop this up. A little bit further back, Matt. Stop. Again, the pixel individual PNGs that we asked you to pull were from the left side and the right side of Mr. Reeves's face. Later on, we're going to be playing those, correct?
That's correct.
Go ahead, Matt. Next relevant section, Matt. Okay, stop there. Okay, I believe this is the last clip of this particular video. Would you please tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what we're doing here in order for them to be able to understand this video?
This is exactly the same as the last. Enhanced, centered on that, 400% magnification, but now it's going to play back 1/4 speed.
You're ready to stop in a minute? Stop. Again, at a future video, did you do anything with that particular section in order to focus on that more thoroughly and closer for viewing?
Yes.
Okay. And in those other clips, did you also put circles on the two movements that were important to the defense?
You remarked on that. I don't remember. Some of them were rectangles all, but I think they're mostly circles.
Okay. Matt, can you go back a little bit so we can start that segment again, please? Right before that, Matt. Stop. A little bit further forward. Go ahead. Your Honor, we're gonna go a little bit out of sequence, Matt, if we can stop that one. And can you give me Exhibit CC? And the only reason is we're running out of time. First, Your Honor. Mr. Koenig, I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit CC and ask you to please take a look at it and see if you can identify that.
Yes.
And did you view that particular thumb drive to determine whether it fairly and accurately depicted the contents of Q6?
I did.
And does it?
It does.
Your Honor, we would move CC into evidence. Thank you, Your Honor. Segment 1. Okay, stop. Please. Mr. Koenig, what do we have here now? Something you call looped video. What is, please tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what a looped video is.
Means we've taken a section, small section of time, and played it back over and over and over again.
Okay. Is that pretty common in forensics?
Yes.
And that was from cam 11, which would have been the camera to the right if you're facing the screen?
That's correct.
Okay. Go ahead, Matt. And this is 400 magnification?
Yes. And the segment that we're playing here is about approximately 8 seconds before the popcorn event. Is that correct? Sounds right. That the segment itself is about 1.5 seconds.
Segment number 2. Now, this particular segment has some additional highlighted areas, a red circle and a yellow circle, is that correct?
That's correct.
Highlighting movement,
Yes.
400% magnification.
Yes.
Go ahead, Matt. Next segment, Matt.
Mr. Escobar, I have a question about that last two. What was the speed of those two?
Yeah, that wasn't speed adjusted, I don't believe.
It's a regular speed.
Okay, so what, Matt, let's go back to the actual instructions so that we can identify what this is. Okay, and so this is a similar clip, except it's going backwards and forward. Explain to the jury what that means.
That means if I move forward like this, the other one would stop there and then go back. You know, this one, I go forward, and then it shows me just backing up to the beginning again. So it goes forward, back in time.
Okay, and this is at 400% magnification
Correct.
and no adjusted speed.
That's correct.
Again, Mr. Koenig, this is a segment of the video that precedes any of the popcorn, about 8 seconds.
Correct.
Next segment. Okay, this one is 1 minute loop enhanced, correct?
Correct.
Red circles highlighting and yellow circles highlighting movement, correct?
Correct.
50% playback, 400% magnification, so half the speed on this
But
one.
it's only in the forward direction, no backward.
Okay. Go ahead, Matt. Next segment, Matt. Okay. What is this?
Same as the last one, 50% playback speed, enlarged in that area, enhanced, but this one includes the backward. So forward, and then it's played backward. And then forward and backward.
Next segment, Matt. What is this clip illustrating?
Again, it's a loop about 1.5 seconds, enhanced, only in the forward direction here, red circling and the yellow circling. This is at 1/4 speed, same 1.5 seconds.
And 400% magnification.
Yes.
Go ahead, Matt. Next segment, Matt, I believe it would be the last one. Okay, so what do we have here?
And this would be, again, that 1.5 second forward and backward loops. Enhance, red circle, the highlighted object, yellow circle where the movement is, 25% playback, high magnification, approximately centered on the ear.
Again, this being approximately 8 seconds before the next clip with the hands in the alleged popcorn.
Correct.
Go ahead, Matt. Thank you, Matt. Your Honor, may we approach?
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we've reached a stopping point for today. There's a bit more to go, and it would take us way past the time when we can stay for today. So I'm going to let you go now. Please remember all my instructions. Hang on, I can't see everyone. Please remember all my instructions during the recess. Don't do any independent research of any sort. Don't discuss the facts of the case amongst yourselves or with anyone else. And I will see you back, report back to the jury pool room about 8, whatever time you need to be there. We want to start at 8:30. And if possible, could you check and see or make arrangements? We may work a little later tomorrow night. Is that going to be a problem for anyone? I'd like to, we may be able to do that tomorrow night if possible, okay? All right, any questions for today? All right, thank you for your continued attention.
All rise for the recess till 8:30.